Okay, welcome back. And here is Henderson, who will talk first, followed by James. So, Henderson.
Yeah, I like that. Go on. Okay, I'm going to talk. I'll say a bit about when and what we do, and then I'll go on to some bigger things as well, and then I'll sort of tie it into what's happening here, hopefully in a way that makes some sort of sense. Right, Writing East Midlands. It's as it sounds. We're a literature development agency, one of 6 others around the country that cover the country in a sort of network. We all do writing development in some way. We're a publicly funded community interest company. We do writing-based projects, obviously, and East Midlands is our patch. We're very interested in inclusivity, we're interested in diversity, we're interested in creative ambition and quality, and we're increasingly interested in the idea of art as a medium for social change, which I'll say more about later. And our mission, I guess, is to help, and I say help, that's important, that word, build a thriving community of writing across the region through strong partnerships and projects. We aim, or we try, to support writers at every level. I think that's been touched on a few times. We try and provide development at all age groups, and we also try to develop a body of evidence and be an advocate for increased public and private investment in the art. And to do this, we work with lots of organisations, lots of arts organisations, we work with individual artists, we work with producers, local authorities, schools, universities, museums, libraries, you name it, we'll work with them at some point. We're very venue focused, we're very site specific, and we're interested in building audiences for literature. We see ourselves as a catalytic organisation. I'm going to borrow a little a quote from somebody a bit bigger than me. We try and work to help writers help themselves. We've got limited resources, so that is the only way that we can do things and do things really well. We're very open to risk. We want to make change, and we're very happy if an activity that we kick off, and this is the catalytic bit, is then taken up locally by people doing better, so we can move on, do new things, start new things elsewhere. Elsewhere is really important to us because we're a regional organisation. We spread our butter thinly, but lumpily in some places, and that very much depends on the partnerships that we find in different places. We're an arts council national portfolio organisation, which means we respond to AC's 5 long-term goals, 10-year goals. I'm only interested in 1, 2 and 5, I don't know what 3 and 4 are, James will probably tell you that. But 1 is that we're interested in talent development, obviously. 2 is we're interested in audiences for literature. And 5, we're interested in providing opportunities for children and young people to experience the art. I'm going to throw a few figures out here. I'm going to try and avoid being defensive. The reason I'm doing it is because we are regional. We do more things in some places, and occasionally there is a perception that we'll do more in some places than others. So this is what we're doing here in Leicester. We have done here in Leicester and Leicestershire. We're one of the biggest employers of freelance writers across the region. 46% of our delegates over the last year to our conference have come from Leicester and Leicestershire. 32% of our mentees have been from Leicester. And we've got the writing school East Midlands here, which puts on about 30 courses a year. There's as many as 300 or 400 students. We've got a young writers group that runs at Curve and has done for the last 3 years. It's got a very strong cohort of young writers there. We've done 12 residencies in schools, community centres, museums and heritage properties in the last 3 years. Most recently at Leicester City of Sanctuary, hello Malcolm, and at Spark Festival. And we support Unistan at Leicester University. 34% of our writers on the database are from Leicester and Leicestershire. The East Midlands Book Awards and the Aurora writing competition is really strongly supported by Leicester. I don't have a percentage there, but they're really strongly supported by Leicester and Leicestershire. Lyric Lounge started here. Probably found its strongest expression, I guess, here back in 2009, and since then there'll be 5 other lyric lounges here. And we've got a lot of project work planned here over the next 2 or 3 years if we get the project funds. So that's, we'll say a bit more about them in a bit. I was asked to talk about profile as we have, and what's happening with the profile of Leicester writing. And I kind of thought that it's an interesting question right there, because are we talking about profile of individual artists, or are we talking about the profile of the art form? Are we talking about Leicester as an originator of great art, or are we talking about Leicester artists, or are we talking about Leicester as a destination for great writing? Because they're all subtly different questions. The first two, artist and art form, we struggled with that at one point a lot when we first started 2009. We thought, are we talking about the writing, or are we talking about the art, the writing, the writers? We focus on writing, on writers. We offer one-to-one support and advice, and do a lot of that. And I think there's people in this room that we've talked to at various times about what they're doing, what they'd like to do, and how we can support it. We run a mentoring program, which has been touched on, I think, by Bubba earlier. That's open twice a year. We do a critical read scheme, which is manuscript appraisal. We run the writing school, which I've mentioned. We run the conference, which I've mentioned. We have something called Routes to Writing, which are really workshops which happen quarterly. They're aimed at building practices, creative practices. We run residencies all over the place, and we're more and more interested in this idea of pathways, which we've spoken about earlier, about how you come in at one end and have a journey which takes you to where you would like to go to, wherever that may be. And the idea is that you're able to jump into a pathway at various access points and jump off when you'd like to. And that's, I think we'll probably talk more about that earlier, but it's from being a child, and it's to professional writers, and what are the routes for that if you want to make that journey. We've got limitations. Our limitations are capacity. There's only 3.8 of us, full-time equivalent. Our limitations around money and resources, and the regional remit, which is a strength of ours, is also a difficulty, a challenge, because of the limits elsewhere. So that goes back to the helping writers help themselves, which is the way we think about things in the office. That's artists. Now, if we're talking about art form, I think and we might be talking about that more tonight, I don't know. But I was asked to take a whip around the country and see what's going on elsewhere. And I'm deliberately going to pick out cities which are like Leicester in some way, which basically means I'm not going to talk about London, which is not like anywhere. In Norwich, which is a kind of centre for gravity for literature at the moment, they highlight their internationalism. They're very driven by a successful festival, and also by a relationship with University of East Anglia, which has got a long history for literature development. And they've got UNESCO City of Literature status. What it means is they're able to make growing international connections and have a very successful funding model. I'm not sure, now this may sound critical, but it's just a comment, I'm not sure how that all benefits the local writers over there. It certainly benefits the city, and it certainly benefits the perception that Norwich is a great place for B2B, for literature. Dublin's interesting as well. Very, very long, very rich, very well-known literary tradition. It's got a major international prize, the Impact Prize. It's also got UNESCO Cities of Literature status. They've got a very high profile living writers, and they've got great tourist attractions. It's a good place to go, isn't it, Dublin, for a night out. Edinburgh's Edinburgh. Don't need to say much more about that. It's got an amazing festival, as has Hay and Cheltenham. They're kind of special places because of that. Manchester's interesting. They've recently, very, very recently, gained UNESCO City of Literature status, and again they built that around a very successful festival and a strong identity and a connection to other cultural forms up there, so it's kind of interesting. Birmingham, very strong local scene, like Leicester, well-established festival, not huge. They have a cultural hotspot in Moseley, which is kind of sucking in lots of creatives, and people want to be there, and that's a bit of a driver for literature and other art forms. It's a place you can still afford to buy a house if you're a creative for a bit, not much longer, but for a bit. And I've good reason to believe that they'll be going for UNESCO City of Literature status very soon as well. I think I can say that. Nottingham. It's coalescing resources around its City of Literature at the moment. It's got a very high focus on literacy. It's not clear yet what that'll mean for the writing community over there, and it's not clear whether creating a new institution might actually weaken local organisations rather than strengthen them. I think there's care that's needed around that. Their pitch is around literacy, as I've said, but it's also around the diverse literature cultures that they've got over there. So it's going to be really interesting to see how those sorts of promises are honoured and how that develops. Derby's increasingly interesting, becoming very strong over the last 2 or 3 years, mainly because of a very successful book festival, very traditional, done incredibly well, but they've also got a very rapidly developing spoken word scene there. That's just had a new poetry festival there. Interesting identity. It's run by very highly committed and very collaborative individuals, very driven people, and they've got a very strong working class identity, very inclusive to what they're doing, which is slightly different to elsewhere. I think I'll probably do with cities. I guess what I'm saying from these examples is that these places have strong identities, literary identities, or they've managed to identify exactly what they are. And they've used it to develop the art form, and they have fairly strong centralised strategies. It's a clear case for support, if you like, in all of those places. And that seems to be, to me, to be a necessary process if you want to walk down that path here. I'm not saying that it has to be that path, but if there's a similar desire to create some sort of strategy, establishing what the identity here is I think necessary. The questions would be, if you are going to be strategic about what you're doing, that word has been used before I sat here, is how does it benefit everybody? Because when you centralise things, there is a risk attached to centralising things, I think. One of them is who gets prioritised in strategy and who's not, and how that works and why those decisions are made. Who owns it and who controls it, who runs it. Do you need a thing for that? Does that thing then become necessary to run and attract new resources? What effect does it have on diversity and the multiplicity of organisations and individuals that make a really healthy literary culture, one that's really strong here? I don't have the answers to those questions, but I'm happy to help talk about them and find them. Some of the things that might be considered, some of the things have already been said here is, and I've touched on, is what does literature do? Is it just for itself? And that's great if it is. But can it do other things? Can it contribute to social cohesion, health and well-being, economic uplift, all those sorts of things which run alongside it, which we strongly believe in? How might it become, I think somebody's missing, which is a bit of a shame, because this is a question here, is how might it become part of a wider cultural strategy in the city? How is it supported by local authority, by the universities, by Arts Council England, by people with money? How might the literary infrastructure here, and I'm talking about the events and the development pathways which we've touched on, different funding streams, what individuals are doing, how do these get joined up? And I think Farhana's calendar is a great start. and the Writers Showcase infrastructure is a great start. How's this all joined up so that people know where things are and when things are happening and how they can dip into them? How might literature be bolted on to other sectors, the entertainment sector, health, tourism? And what's it mean for diversity and for community here as well? It's a really interesting moment in time, I think, that we've got. There are signs that, strong signs, I think, that there's a will down south to, and by people with money, to invest in the metropolitan areas outside of London. I think Leicester has got a real vibrancy. I think that's come through tonight. A real vibrancy about it, and it's great this meeting's happening. The strategic word's a difficult one. You could call it something else. You might call it a direction. I don't know what that is, but it's great to start this conversation. When we'd like to be part of it, we can help with the things that we do as artists, but with conversation we can talk about the art form as well.
Hi, thank you very much for inviting me. I'm James Urquhart. I'm the Literature Relationship Manager for Arts Council England, based in the Midlands, so the entire Midlands is my patch, Wales to Skeg. I was going to start by talking about the richness and diversity of the literary scene in Leicester, but I think we've nailed that. As you said earlier, if in 24 years it's as vibrant now as it ever has been, I think we can say this is a very good starting point for this conversation, as you say, Henderson. So I'm going to skip that and that. And Bob has talked about that and that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give a really brief insight into what the Arts Council is and what its role might be, because Ambrose said it'd be quite useful to mention grants for the arts and things like that. And then I'm going to kind of throw out a few provocations. I don't have a crystal ball, but I'm very happy to kind of disrupt. So, Arts Council. Our mission is achieving great art and culture for everyone, and I think something that we've already heard this evening, the easy bit, is the achieving great art and culture. There's a lot of it about. There's an embarrassment of riches in this room and from what we've heard this evening. So there's not a difficulty in locating and finding opportunities for artists. There are many opportunities there, and there are many challenges there around developing and supporting artists. As you say, Bob, we're particularly interested in how artists can be paid appropriately. As the National Development Agency for the Arts, we can't not be. We're very positive about that. We're also very positive about the role that volunteers and volunteer movements have in generating activities, in beginning to kind of coalesce partnerships and arrangements, and often festivals essentially don't run without volunteers, whether it's Glastonbury or whether it's Everybody's Reading. So we're very aware of those things. The difficult bit is often the for everyone, which I think Henderson and others have touched upon. There's lots of great art here in Leicester. How can you find other audiences or allow people who don't currently experience the wonders and benefits of your art to do that, to be a new audience? We talked about invisibility. I'll come back to that in a moment. But in terms of our role at Arts Council, we have three primary roles: advocacy, development and funding. Advocacy, essentially, the simplest way to talk about it is in our higher level conversations with government and local authorities, where we're trying to secure agreement on the value of arts and culture, both intrinsically and economically, and in other ways. Leicester City feels really receptive to this, not least in terms of the receptivity of the council, but also other organisations that, such as Attenborough and Curve, that are positive in opening their doors where appropriate, where possible, to artists. And also the positive engagement of both universities. Development. One of my roles is to be available for offering support and advice to writers and artists seeking to develop their craft and to a certain extent their careers. Sometimes that's a direct conversation with me. I'm reasonably accessible. Lots of people know how to get in touch with me. You can get in touch with me through our website or through our call centre if that is if you don't have any other contact. Sometimes we refer to other people who might be able to signpost or offer direct advice that is more appropriate for the writer or artist in that role. And the primary role would be passing on to Writing East Midlands, because that is a development agency that we fund through our national portfolio. And Henderson similarly passes writers on to me when I'm the person who can offer more appropriate advice. And often that is around our funding programmes. We have a lot of funding programmes. No, we don't. We've got a few funding programmes. The one that is most relevant here is Grants for the Arts. So I'll talk a little bit about that, because Grants for the Arts is our open access rolling funding programme. You can apply for anything from £1,000 to £100,000, broadly speaking. Crucially, it's open to individuals as well as to organisations. There aren't many public funds, certainly in the arts, which are open to individuals. So that's one of its key attributes. Funds a very broad range of arts and culture projects. I'm not going to go into the detail of it because it can be death by PowerPoint. Here's a PowerPoint I prepared earlier. I would recommend that you just look on our website, or actually just Google Grants for the Arts. It, I hope, will take you to our Grants for the Arts webpage that has on it a list of resources, and that's probably the best first approach to having a look. If you have a project that you think might be fundable, that's a first sifting process. Then come and have a conversation with me if that's useful, or with Henderson, or there are quite a few others around here who've had experience with Grants for the Arts, who might also be able to offer insights as well. So Google Grants for the Arts, that's the first start. The future. I've been kind of steadily rewriting this as people have spoken throughout the evening, because I think there have been some really interesting insights that have come out. But just following from the prompt that Ambrose gave in the programme for this evening, raising the profile of Leicester writers, Leicestershire writers. I think my first point would be, how can you develop and share your audiences? It's something that we've talked about in various different ways tonight. And all the events that we've heard about don't necessarily have unique audiences, but they have distinct audiences. What I would say is, if there's ways that, as fellow travellers, if you like, you can share each other's audiences, it's not a zero-sum game. I'm absolutely confident that by punting someone onto someone else's night, you're not going to lose your own audience. It by and large doesn't tend to happen like that. Something that I thought was really interesting happened a few years ago that local writer Maria Taylor was involved in, and in fact it came from the Shindig stable, actually, Nine Arches Press. There was an event at Urquhart Arts Centre which platformed page poets and performance poets. It's a really, really simple idea. Two groups of writers that typically have quite different audiences, and they managed to get an audience where people came for one particular thing, but actually were exposed to the wealth of talent that was on the other side of the programme. And that was quite interesting. So, what I would say is, think creatively about how you can alter your audience, how you can find new audiences, how you can share existing audiences. Don't reinvent the wheel. There are lots of people in Leicester who are receptive to poetry activities. Find ways of talking to each other as poetry organisers and activists and programmers, and see if there are ways that you can share the love, if you like. I think Farhana mentioned earlier, step out of our own circle. I think that's really important. There is an element of talking to ourselves, particularly in the poetry world. Your average poetry audience is 95% poets. I think that's quite an okay. That's not a national statistic. That's my straw poll, and I think it's quite interesting to dwell on who we're performing to. There's nothing wrong with that, but it does present an opportunity. If only 5% of your audience are actually coming and are not willing to perform as well, is there an opportunity to increase that? So just moving on, if I can decipher all these scribbles, thinking about partnerships. I mean, we've heard again tonight in various different forms. I mean, partnerships are not valuable in themselves. There's no point getting together with another organisation if the only purpose is to say to a funder or to try and increase the scope of your meetings. The thing about partnerships that is vital is that they tend to offer more than the sum of their parts. People create partnerships that are effective where you find people or organisations who can add something to what you want to do, and often you find that will enable you to do more of what you're wanting to achieve by drawing in other people. It doesn't necessarily cost more, it doesn't necessarily take more resources. And I think Writing East Midlands is an example of an organisation that is very good at brokering partnerships and finding organisations or people around the region that can usually fit a particular project and that might be able to add value to that. And I don't know, Henderson, I'm sure could say more about that. But just broadly, we've already established there's a throng of talented writers and creatives in Leicester and Leicestershire. So how can you join forces with artists or organisations to create something new and distinctive, something more than what you do under your own steam? How might you, for example, be able to create new work that might animate Leicester's libraries or the New Walk Museum? Are there non-arts organisations that we've not looked at that might prove willing hosts or partners or even commissioners? We funded literature projects in shopping centres, on buses, at sports venues. Lydia's only just come up with a tour of the buses in Leicester. There are ways in which, going back to Fahana's idea of disruption, if you put your art out in front of people, then you are immediately provoking or hopefully attracting a new audience. And if you, I'm not saying that will necessarily lead to a flood of people coming off the bus and going directly into the Y or any other venues for a poetry night, but equally the flip of that is if you don't do that, you are always talking to yourselves. You are always talking to the people who already know about the wonders of your work. So finding some way of moving out and getting new audiences is really crucial. A couple of random ideas. Leicester has twin cities. We talked about international opportunities. I know that organisations such as Mouthy Poets in Nottingham did some quite creative work just by getting hold of cities where they had often the flimsiest of links and developed a rapport with like-minded organisations, poetry groups. These are an opportunity. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying there's a guaranteed win there. But they're kind of creative opportunities where you can, at relatively little resource or effort, given the ubiquity of social media and the simplicity of electronic communication, you can kind of put those feelers out and kind of make inquiries to if there is any receptivity internationally. So be ambitious, particularly if you're coming to the Arts Council or to other funders. We want to be inspired by your vision of what you want to do. As a funder, we don't try to tell people what to do. We want to fund projects that fit into our funding remit, which is pretty broad in terms of going to the arts, and that inspire us that they are, on the one hand, great art, and on the other hand, providing opportunities for the English public to experience and get the benefit of those activities. So be bold, be exciting. If you're not excited by your project, it's possible that most other people won't be either. What opportunities are for using creative media and digital technology? There's an enormous breadth of opportunities going way beyond my technical comfort zone in terms of understanding what technology can inform in a literature project. But really simple examples would be, is it possible to Skype a Sri Lankan poet onto your platform, for example? These things have been done for some time now, but actually it's surprising how infrequently you see them. Technology is getting better, bandwidth is getting wider, the opportunity to bring in someone from Manhattan or from Chongqing, one of the twin cities, seems to be there. Is it for the taking? I don't know. Put feelers out and see what the opportunity is. Individual artists, have you thought about touring? If you haven't, talk to Lydia or talk to Rob G. Rob G has, we put a very small amount of funding into Rob G's recent work. In which he did all the legwork, he did the creative work. He developed a brilliant show, as Matthew mentioned earlier, an Alzheimer's whodunit, absolute gift, and with a small amount of funding from Grants for the Arts, but then managed to tour it to a lot of different places, and that really opened his opportunities as an artist. It's great for the places he toured it to because they got the Rob G show. That was fine, but actually what it did for Rob G was as important, possibly more important, in terms of being developmental for an artist. There are many more examples. Touring in, something else that was mentioned, I forget, it may have been Fahana again. Why not invite the South Asian Literature Festival from London? They're keen to put out feelers. You know, they've got an established, and that's only just one example that's kind of off the top of my head, but they have an established product, if you like. They've already shown some interest in Leicester through various conversations that I've been aware of. You know, why not go out there and look for organisations or for activities that you think, why can't you come and inhabit Leicester? Why can't we big up Leicester's profile by saying we don't just bring in Jean Benter-Breeze, who is, you know, as you say, a fantastic asset, and I'm really heartened to hear how widely her influence has been welcomed and loved. But why stop there? You know, think about who you would like to see here, and that will then raise a set of questions as to, well, how are we going to go about doing that? And that might then bring you into contact with a whole number of potential partners or organisations or individuals or possibly the Arts Council who might be able to chip away at answers to that question. Am I doing okay for time? I'm having a bit of a rant here. Okay, finally, so in summary, we won't do that summary, I'll just say my key provocations will be partnerships and this question of visibility. Who are you invisible to? Who is it you want to be visible to? Writing is an interesting spectrum of, on the one hand, or at one end of the spectrum, garret dwellers. I don't use that term pejoratively, I just quite like it. Of people who write and who don't share, or maybe don't want to share. Maybe they write for themselves. There's nothing wrong with that. All the way through to, for convenience, shall we say, performance poetry, in that it's an art that is often even not written, but it's up on stage, and the medium is the conveying of that artistic quality. So there's a whole spectrum there, and not all of it requires performance, not all of it requires visibility. But if, as various people have mentioned tonight, in various different ways, there's an uncertainty about how visible the literary scene is in Leicester, or an anxiety that you should be more seen, my throwback to you would be, who is not seeing us, who should be seeing us? And how do we identify those people? Which brings us all the way back to the earlier question about getting new audiences.